Imagine that it's 10 years from today. You're looking back at your life. What decisions are you making right now that your future self will desperately wish you would change? Lately, I found myself thinking a lot about regret. And not because I'm living with some massive amount of regret today, but as I've gotten older, and especially since becoming a father, I've started asking myself a different question when it comes to how I approach my work. What decisions am I making right now that my future self might regret? Because here's what I've realized. Regret rarely shows up after one catastrophic mistake. Regret quietly accumulates through 1,000 small decisions that in the moment feel completely justifiable. One more late night at the office. One more canceled date night. One more vacation postponed. One more promise that I'll slow down and prioritize my health and happiness after this quarter. And the scary part is that you don't feel regret while you're in the process of creating it. You feel it years later when your kids are grown, your marriage feels distant, your health is gone, or you've built a business everyone envies, but somehow you lost yourself along the way. So today, I want to challenge you to think differently. Not about the regrets that you already have, but about the ones you may be unknowingly creating. Because if you can recognize this now, you have the opportunity to build a future that you'll be deeply grateful to look back on. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstuck High Performer podcast. My name is Paul Salter. I'm a high performance mindset coach and hypnotherapist, and I help founders, CEOs, high performing entrepreneurs make what matters most matter now, before success costs them the very life that they worked so hard to build. And if you're new to the show, welcome. I appreciate you tuning in. Give you a quick lay of the land. Every Monday, I fly solo, giving you a raw, candid, personable message and dose of truth and inspiration that you need to get out of your own way, to no longer be imprisoned by your own success. And then every Thursday, I sit down and chop it up with another high performer to give you a behind the scenes look about the sacrifices, the trade-offs, the costs of achieving next level success. And my ask is quite simple. If you find value in these conversations, share them with somebody in your inner circle. I don't run ads. I do that intentionally. I want to be of as much value as possible. You can support the show by simply sharing it. And if you haven't done so already, taking 30 seconds to leave a genuine rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to today's conversation. Let's dive in. And the core theme that I want to build around in this conversation is that regret isn't so much a feeling as it is a receipt. The decision is the purchase and the regret comes later. And what I want you to understand is, again, regret is not often the byproduct of one catastrophic mistake. It's typically the byproduct of an accumulation over thousands of seemingly insignificant decisions. That late night in the office, a canceled vacation, a postponed date night, one more time saying, I'll be home after this call, this project, one more ignored doctor's appointment or health scare, one more dinner disconnected, scrolling on your phone, responding to emails, and one more weekend choosing work over family and recovery. Again, No single decision on its own, in this case, is gonna feel catastrophic or filled with regret. However, years later, those decisions, not only do they accumulate and begin to tell a story. I missed my kids growing up. I don't know who I am outside of work. I sacrificed my marriage for a company that replaced me. Regret's not created in one moment. It's built from one ordinary, justifiable decision at a time. And I imagine you currently have some regret. And the perspective shift I want to offer you is to stop seeing whatever regret is currently present as failure, or those past decisions and actions that caused regret as failures. And instead, shift your perspective to see that feeling of regret as information. Because when a regret is present, it reveals what matters, what your values actually are, what you've been neglecting, what you've been avoiding. And without regret, you never recalibrate. You've heard me say it before. Emotions are teachers. If you choose to slow down, acknowledge them, sit with them, feel them, and are curious and open-minded enough to explore what they are trying to teach you. So again, regret can be seen as a teacher. It's information, it's feedback about what matters, what you value, and what is most important to you. And a client example comes to mind here. One of the clients I work with has a 14-year-old son. And he told me, it was early on into our journey working together, that his son asked him before his son's upcoming birthday, "Daddy, where are you going to be during this birthday?" Because the backstory here is that this client had missed the last 7 consecutive birthdays because he was off on work trips, off at job sites, trying to close deals or support his team out in the field, that he missed 7 consecutive birthdays. So at this point, his son had come to expect his dad to be gone, to be absent from his birthday. And as we unpacked that, it was quite emotional for him. And what he realized was that he had just simply repeated the same pattern of his upbringing. His dad constantly traveling for work, constantly placing work as a priority over everything else. And we were able to connect with the sadness, the confusion, the disappointment that he himself felt as a little boy, that more or less mirrored the same experience his own little boy was having year after year as he chose work over his son's birthday. Fortunately, and it's too soon to tell, my client made a commitment to never miss a birthday again. We'll see what happens in the next year when his son turns 15. But my point being is this regret, it needs to be felt because it reveals so much. It teaches so much. And what's interesting here is there's actually two main forms of regret. There's the regret of action, and then there's the regret of inaction. So regret of action is I shouldn't have bought the company, took the promotion, had the affair, ignored my gut, yelled at my kids, exited and sold too early. This type of regret hurts. It's filled with learning lessons and opportunity to do different in the future. What most people experience, however, is that this type of regret of action, eventually fades because it is so ripe with information, feedback, and learning opportunities. Regret of inaction, however, is I wish I would have. And this type of regret has the potential to compound forever. I wish I would have asked for help sooner, spent more time with my family. I wish I told her I loved her. I wish I slowed down. I wish I started the business. I wish I quit the corporate job. I wish I listened to my gut. Do any of those sting, hit deep? What's interesting is that research and psychologists consistently find that people carry this type of regret, I wish I would have, far longer. Meaning, again, all emotion is simply energy in motion. And you can imagine regret like a 20, a 40, maybe an 80-pound dumbbell in a backpack upon your back. And just imagine how exhausting and costly it is trying to move through life with that dumbbell, that weight, that unnecessary weight of regret on your back. There's an interesting book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. Quick backstory, Bronnie was a palliative care nurse who spent years caring for people in the final weeks of their lives, listening to honest conversations from people who knew that their time was running out. And she engaged in deep, vulnerable conversations about their life, their choices, the trade-offs, the sacrifices, and regrets. And in these conversations, there weren't hypothetical regrets or lessons from a research study. These were real reflections from people who had nothing left to prove and no reason to pretend. And the top 5 regrets of the dying that the author Bronnie identified were, I wish I didn't work so much. And I'm going to paraphrase them slightly. I wish I didn't suppress my emotions. I wish I didn't neglect specific relationships. I wish I didn't deny myself more happiness and joy. I wish I didn't constantly strive to live up to the expectations of others. And what struck me when reading this book is how closely these top 5 regrets mirror the patterns that I see every day in founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and high performers. Different careers, different levels of success, but the same tendency to postpone life, living, the same tendency to sacrifice relationships, ignore self-care, and assume there will always be more time. I mean, think about it. You know, as I was preparing for this episode, I wrote down a laundry list of regrets I've engaged in deep discussions on with my clients recently. And some of them that came up were not spending enough time with my spouse, with my children, neglecting my health, pursuing more money over more family time. I regret being disconnected and not present on vacations and trips, missing key moments with my children. I regret holding on to anger and resentment, choosing not to forgive someone and not speaking up. And these all parallel or mirror the top 5 regrets of the dying. And that's why I think every entrepreneur should know these 5 regrets. And not because you're dying, but because you still have the opportunity to avoid them. And let me be candid. Another year of repeating the same patterns is expensive. And if you're currently on a trajectory that is going to accumulate a vast amount of regret in the years to come, I want you to understand that it's possible to build a new path, to get off the current path, and to move forward in alignment, to truly experience more peace, more joy, more presence, connection, and fulfillment. And this is the type of work that I do with my private one-on-one coaching clients. And if what I've shared thus far is really resonating with you and you'd like to explore what it's like to work together, I encourage you to use the link in the show notes below to apply for one-on-one coaching with me. I want to introduce a concept known as regret minimization. And the premise here is a simple question. Which option is my future self least likely to regret? And there's a story around a decision-making framework that really embodies this regret minimization topic. And it's a story from Jeff Bezos when he hadn't even started at Amazon yet. And at the time, he had what most people would consider a dream job on Wall Street. Great income, prestige, security, a clear, successful career trajectory. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the internet was about to change the world, and he had an opportunity to be a part of it. So instead of asking himself, what's the safest decision? Or what if I fail? He imagined himself at 80 years old, looking back on his life and asking, which choice will I regret least? Because he realized even if Amazon failed, he wouldn't regret having the courage to try. What he would regret was never knowing what might have been. I think that's such a powerful framework and prompt to ask yourself, because most of us aren't deciding whether or not to start the next Amazon. We're deciding whether to have the hard conversation, to prioritize our health, to be present with our family, to trust our intuition, or to keep postponing the life we keep telling ourselves we'll live someday. So every meaningful decision can be and should be filtered through the same question. Which choice is my future self least likely to regret? That one question has the power to shift your focus from short-term comfort to long-term fulfillment. And in just a moment, I'm going to give you a framework just to really help give you some tangible action steps around this regret minimization concept. But before I do that, I think it is important you hear this reframe around regret, decision-making, and being so dedicated to your business. We've talked about so many decisions that, again, on their own, examined as an N equals 1, seem insignificant, easily justifiable. And we've talked about how really the process in which regret is accumulated, is through the accumulation of thousands of tiny one-off decisions. So I want you to see some of these decisions through a different light. You think that you're making a business decision in these situations, but in reality, you're actually making life decisions. And that's an important shift because you currently might believe you're deciding whether to take another client, hire another employee, work another weekend, accept another promotion, answer another email, delay another vacation. There's a reason behind it. It's easy to justify in the moment. But beneath every one of those choices is a deeper decision. What kind of life am I creating? Every decision contributes to your future life. What kind of life are you creating with that singular decision? Most people never ask that question. It's time you start. Let me give you a framework for regret minimization to help give you some tools and guardrails to walk through this process. And really, I'm just going to share a couple of prompts to get the creative, reflective juices flowing. And the first question is, all of this is going to build off of what choice is my future self least likely to regret? Another way to reflect on it is, what will future me thank me for? Not today, but 5 years down the road? Which decision or which choice aligns with who I want to become? This is an opportunity to check in and ensure you're choosing identity, who you want to become, over convenience. Which decision honors my values instead of my fears? This is a big distinction because we've talked about it before on the show. Fear often disguises itself as logic. Which decision is going to honor your core values? Are you choosing comfort or peace? Because comfort today often creates regret tomorrow. Temporary discomfort often creates lasting peace. And perhaps the most impactful prompt and conversation to consider internally is the following. If your son or daughter copied your decision, would you be proud of them? If there's one thing that I hope you take away from today's conversation, it's this. Your future isn't built by one life-changing decision. It's built by the small decisions you repeat every single day. Every time you ignore your intuition. Every time you choose achievement over alignment. Every time you tell yourself, I'll deal with that later. You're casting a vote for the life you'll eventually look back on. The good news is this. Regret isn't your destiny. Awareness, and then of course action, gives you the opportunity to change direction before regret ever has a chance to become your story. And if today's conversation felt personal, if you recognized yourself in the patterns we talked about, that's exactly the work that I help founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and high-performing individuals like yourself actually do. Together, we uncover the subconscious beliefs, emotional patterns, and invisible habits that keep you trapped in the success prison you've created so you can finally build a life that feels as successful as it looks. You don't have to wait until you're looking back with regret to make a different decision. You can make it today. And if you're ready to get that support, that push, that accountability, I invite you to use the link in the show notes below to reach out and apply for one-on-one coaching. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Unstuck High Performer podcast. If you found today's conversation valuable, first and foremost, go reflect, go listen again, review your notes, really dwell on the prompts and the perspective shifts I shared with you. And then go share it with somebody in your inner circle who you know is making one decision after the next that is quickly and significantly accumulating regret. Share this episode, and if you haven't done so already, it takes 30 seconds to leave a genuine rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to today's conversation. Thank you for listening. Make today great, and I'll catch you in the next episode.